Hi, Marsha Parker. Welcome to October 7. Thank you so much for being here today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Right, so I'm Marsha Parker. I'm a Jew living at, as the Romans and the Greeks would have said, at the end of the earth, in East Anglia. Um, so we're sort of right outside the diaspora. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it's like being in a place where actually there's more and more Jewish people moving here, secular Jews, probably not religious Jews, because we don't have a synagogue or anything. And so I'm just going to chat about what it's like. And Norman came to visit us and said, would I like to do a chat? So I said, oh, okay. So I think at the focus of Judaism in our little town, this little town, once upon a time, was as famous as Liverpool was in the last century and the century before. It was a huge port in medieval times. It was really famous. They were dealing with the whole of Europe. It was also history-wise, King's Lynn was the first pogrom in 1190 outside of London, the very first pogrom. So it was a very small Jewish community, and at least half of them were slaughtered. King Richard I was going off on the Crusades, and he said when he went, "Don't touch my Jews," but a written letter isn't good enough, and people on the way to the Crusades um, just decided they'd start slaughtering people who weren't Christians on their way to the Crusades. So that's our sort of ancient history. The focal point for Judaism, there is nothing to say that Jews were there or are still there, except this. This is a picture of the little cemetery.
That's so cute.
It's very cute. It's very, very cute.
It's like a family cemetery.
It is indeed. And I've been looking at that. So that's our visual point. That we open once a week. Um, People have often said then they sat in the bus, they could see over the walls, and people look through the door. So we open once a week for a couple of hours, and it is a really wonderful point of contact. Yesterday we had, which is really unusual, it wasn't a special day, we had 12 visitors. We had a strange bloke who came in with his cowboy hat and his long beard, and he said he knew some Jews once.
Oh, wow.
So he got to meet some more again. And then we had somebody else. I did a tour around the town, showing people this is the site of, because there's nothing to see. Um, and we had somebody whose ancestors uh, is actually buried in that little cemetery in
Wow.
a no headstone. It's a pauper's grave. They were a very, very poor family. We had a town councillor come and visit us. We had a lot of visitors yesterday. Well, a lot, 12. 12 is a lot.
12 is a lot. Yeah.
On our open day, Heritage Day, we usually get about 200. So it's a really good contact for people who very often know nothing about Judaism or Jews. We're a rare species to come and find out that we're human beings. We don't have horns. We don't go around slaughtering small children
Yeah.
or making matzah with their bones and blood. And so, yeah, and then the other thing that my husband and I do is we go in and out of the local primary schools. Part of the education system in Britain, it's a statutory requirement that they learn worldviews, they learn about other religions. So we quite often get called in to do the Jewish bit, to talk to them about who we are, and what we believe. And we always make sure we cover the whole spectrum. I can say there are people like this who believe that, the Bible was written by God. And there are people I can say, like my son, who says, I'm Jewish, but I don't believe in God. So, we just represent the Jewish faith. We get some political conversations as well about what's happening in the world at present. So that's always interesting to ask people how many Jews they think there are in the world. And they're very surprised how
Yeah.
few of us exist. The size of Israel, they seem to think it's a huge country. So we're doing our little bit, and we're doing it politically, but in a very quiet way. And the reason that little cemetery is there, perhaps I'll give you a history of it. It's by a busy road now, and it has a housing estate behind it. But in the olden days, it was by a river. Can everyone see that?
Where is it in the picture?
The cemetery is here, just below my finger,
Oh, okay. So
and
it
it was
was in a street, actually. There was kind of like a main street.
there's a little street with a river next to it.
Uh-huh.
Um, and of course now that river doesn't exist. That river is underneath a main road. So
Okay.
people say, what's it doing here in the middle of town? Well, it wasn't the middle of town when that cemetery was there. It was on the edge of town, and it was by a river. What else? Do you want to ask me questions? I can talk
Yeah. Do
forever.
you know like what year is it from, the cemetery?
Yes, yeah, that's really interesting. So when I started looking after the cemetery, people asked me questions and I didn't know the answers. So I started to do research. And there is a very famous British historian called Cecil Roth, and he wrote a book called The Rise of Provincial Jewry. In other words, the Jews that no longer lived in London but went out into the countryside. And he wrote a page and a half about King's Lynn, and most of it is wrong.
In one page.
So the date he said the date of the cemetery from the stones that they could read, the date was from 1811 to 1846. No, actually, we found much earlier stones in there, so probably from 1795.
Hmm.
And the last burial, I don't know where the stone is because it's been vandalized, but the last burial I know from newspapers was 1852. Then the other thing is there are some documents dating from the 18th century, which were placed in a synagogue. I've been able to read those now and get them translated. So I can say the Jewish community definitely formalized itself in 1767 on Lag BaOmer in 1767.
What do you
Um,
mean formalize themselves? What did they
they
do?
wrote a contract. One of the guys, a Mr. Levi, had a Sefer Torah,
Oh.
and he said he'd sell it to the Jewish community. So they agreed. The five men Sunday afternoon, Lag BaOmer agreed they'd all chip in. So the owner got his £5. That's incredibly cheap, isn't it? Well, I suppose that was worth a lot of money even then. And then they chipped in and they would gradually get repaid as the community subscriptions came in. They'd gradually get the money back. So they now had their Sefer Torah. They had someone who would lead them in services once a week from his room. And they wrote all this down in a document, which
Do
Cecil
you mean
Roth,
in his room, like in his apartment?
in his apartment.
Okay.
And so that is what they call a foundation document because it said how much people were going to pay, what the rules would be, and once they left King's Lynn, they would no longer have any say about how things were going to be run. Um, and then this document has been pasted inside the cover of the accounts book from much later. So you can see, if you look at it carefully, you can see that this document has been folded up and kept in someone's wallet because you can see the creases and the staining. So it's really quite interesting. And two of the people who signed that are buried in our cemetery. Two of the founding members of this little community are buried in the cemetery. One of them is called Abraham Moses Groomsfeld, but he changed his surname to Jones.
Oh.
And I tracked down one of his descendants, and she said to me, "Oh, you know why we're called Jones? Because he saw the name above a shop. It was Michael Jones, only he pronounced it right. You write Jones in Hebrew, and you get Jonas."
Hmm.
So he said, "Oh, that's a good Jewish name, but of course in English you pronounce it as Jones." So this was a very famous family, lots of children, most of them opticians and dentists, and went to live all over Britain. And then the other person was Solomon Levi,
Oh.
and he was a jeweler in King's Lynn. We have lots of interesting stories about him. His son is attacked on the way back home at one of the little villages outside King's Lynn, and he's left for dead.
Wow.
And he manages to crawl to the high road, and he's picked up by somebody in their coach, and they bring him into Lynn, and they take him straight to the magistrates, and he's able to identify who attacked him.
Wow.
So this poor guy as well, is arrested, and he's imprisoned in Norwich prison, and he tries to escape, but he's caught and he's shackled, and eventually he comes to trial, and he's condemned to hanging.
Wow.
And he's hung in King's Lynn, and he confesses to all sorts of other robberies as well. He's obviously quite callous. He just, he doesn't think much of human life. But he makes a good death. He's hung on Hardwick Common outside King's Lynn, and he's only 20.
Oh no.
So poor young Jonas, son of Solomon, has quite an adventurous childhood, really. And it's quite a sad story. Obviously, times were very hard for everybody.
Yeah.
Um,
So, is there anything on the internet about Kisling or the cemetery or
we
Jonas?
we we have our cemetery website,
Yeah?
which if you just put Jewish Cemetery Kings Lynn, that
Let's try
comes up.
that together. How'd you
Oh,
write Kisling? Because I think I didn't write it right well.
oh, Kings Lynn. Okay, Jewish. Put Jewish first, or do you want to share screen and I get it up?
I thought I did share the screen.
Oh,
See?
okay. Cemetery. ER1. Yeah. Do you want me to do it? I'll do it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
You have to like ask to share and I can allow, and now you go ahead and share. Thank you.
Okay.
That would be lovely.
Okay, let's go in. Okay, let me go in
The link is
here.
in the chat. The link is in the chat, guys.
Thank you, Norman. Thank you so much.
Right, I'm not very good at doing this. There we go. There we go. Can you see this?
Yeah, yeah. That's a beautiful website. Thank you for doing that.
So there it is. And we have some history pages. Unfortunately, there we are. There's a walk that we did yesterday. And we have as I keep saying to everybody, I can't do it all. So there's a lot of gaps. There's the foundation document in some really wonderful script. It's I've had a translation done and a lovely chat with the person who translated it. It's written in code. I don't know if anyone is good at reading Hebrew script.
Yeah?
Can you read it?
I don't see your screen.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Hmm. You can't
It's
see this here. Well, I
it's
don't.
just at the bottom. Do you see there's a button says share? The bottom in the middle kinda. There's like an arrow. Yeah, now we're gonna see.
No, I don't want that though.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, let me take you through this. Let me take you through this then.
Okay.
So let me start. Okay, you can see this, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's the cemetery. There is the foundation document.
Wow, lovely.
Those are the people. This man, Aaron de Pass, he was born and bred in King's Lynn. And when he's older, he founds the synagogue in Cape Town, South Africa. And it's quite interesting. He takes a Torah scroll with him from England to Cape Town. And I often think if he took the Torah scroll in 1849 and the King's Lynn community died in 1849, was it the King's Lynn Torah? I don't know.
Sounds like it, doesn't it?
It does be nice. And this is where King's Lynn is. And the original Jewish community came from Amsterdam, and you can see it's quite easy to get to King's Lynn from Amsterdam.
Mm.
So there is Amsterdam in the 18th century. Here's King's Lynn in the 18th century. I think they felt at home. It was a very similar
Yeah.
watery place to live. There we are, King's Lynn in the 18th century. A very watery place, lots of intercepted by lots of rivers and canals. So I think they felt very much at home.
Yeah.
And this is where the cemetery is, and there was a synagogue here, and then there was a high street here, and that's where they all had their businesses.
So how big is this city?
Small. It's getting bigger. There's a 4,000, no, 40,000 houses being built
Mm.
over the next year. So we're going to become quite a big place. It was a very big place when it had a port, then it diminished, and now it's going to get bigger again. So you can see here, you can see the cemetery by the riverside.
Yeah.
And there's an even older photograph. That's better.
Lovely.
Okay. So you can see there's the main road now, and it follows the curve of the river exactly.
Oh, wow.
A painting just nearby. Historically, that's what it looked like. A pretty town. It was described by someone called Daniel Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe, as a pretty town. There's the town square, and this is the big hotel, which is still there. And that's where they used to meet. The Jewish community used to meet there to have their meetings. And the meetings book is really, really, I find it quite interesting, because each meeting starts off with, it was unanimously decided. And it's unanimously decided because Mr. So-and-so caused a disturbance during the service, that he would be excommunicated until he'd paid a fine. And then another entry, it was decided that people would have to buy their burial plot. And then in the account books, we can see who's bought a plot. And anyone who misbehaved would not have the services of the community. The community employed a butcher who was overseen in slaughtering meat, so they had kosher meat. And then at a later date, they put a tax on the meat because too many Jewish people were coming to visit and buying the kosher meat. So, they put a tax on it, so they'd have to pay a little bit more than the members of the community. So the meetings book, I think, is really quite interesting.
Do you think that they bought the plot of the cemetery together? Like, did they finance those
Yes,
together?
because in 1830, there's they buy it. They've obviously leased it before then because the graves are older than the lease, but they do actually buy it, and it is owned by the Board of Deputies and registered in the name. So at one stage, when they wanted to do, they knocked down all the old houses surrounding the cemetery, behind the cemetery. They knocked them all down because they wanted to make town improvements. And they got in touch with the Board of Deputies and said, we want to knock it down. And they said, yep, okay, if you have to exhume, you'll have to find somewhere else to rebury everybody, and that's going to cost you. This is in late 60s, early 70s. 1970s, you'll have to pay about £3,000. And the borough council decided that was because our town has a very old council. It's had a council that meets there. Before democracy, they had a council that used to meet there since the 13th century, and they've kept all the books since then. So anyway, they decided it was far too expensive. And then when they changed their mind and said, yeah, we would like to go ahead and knock it down, the Board of Deputies in this country said, too late. That was the offer. Too late now. It's gone. So we're lucky. And I think everybody is really pleased but it didn't get knocked down because, and we're pleased as Jews because it's the only relic we've got. There you are. There's more views of King's Lynn. That's just up the road from the cemetery. That's the new road that connects King's Lynn to London. Because people often say to me, King's Lynn, where's King's Lynn? This is Jewish people from London. Or where's King's Lynn? And you say, well, it's the main road from London. The A10 goes from London and it finishes at King's Lynn. And they say, well, yeah, but it's not on the way to anywhere. So no, why would we go there? It's not on the way to anywhere. And it's not on the way to anywhere. It's its own destination.
Yeah.
So, whoops. And this was the old poorhouse. And it's quite interesting looking at the Sadaka book that they gave money. They gave money to the poorhouse, not for their own congregants. They paid tzedakah to their own congregants when people were on hard times. I can see that they got a shilling a week. And they also gave some money to the poorhouse for the other inhabitants of the town. And there's another entry which is quite a large amount of money for the widows and orphans of the fishermen. They were very much part of the town. The householders were members of the Freemasons and various gentlemen's clubs. So newspaper cutting, there's a Benjamin Kish, and he belongs to the Conversazioni Club, a bit like Chat. And they have a meeting about stained glass windows, and it's reported in the paper that Benjamin Kish finished the evening singing the Psalms in Hebrew.
Oh, wow.
So they were very much, I think, a very small community, but being a small community, they had to be very much part of the town. And when I've done talks in King's Lynn, people ask me, and they're so well attended, it's quite amazing. Usually 60 to 100 people come to listen to me waffling on. They sort of say, well, what did they look like? What did they look like? And what language did they speak? Well, I can see from the books that we've been left, their English was exemplary. English was absolutely perfect. Copperplate handwriting was beautiful. So they'd been very well schooled. And Benjamin Kish, who I've just spoken about, was a tailor, and he advertised himself as being fashions from London. So he would not have been dressed any different than the most fashionable person around. And as I say, and what about me? Do I look and sound different? I'm a Jew of King's Lynn. They would have been just like me, nothing different. I have to say, some of the little schools we go to in the countryside, they're very anxious when we come and talk to them. They ask us to come and talk. And they're quite anxious because they haven't met a Jewish person before. This must seem very strange to you. I'm very excited, and then perhaps a little bit disappointed because we just look like anybody else and we've dressed the same as anybody else. I have to say, sometimes, just for the sake of it, I will dress up as my great grandmother did, wear my scarf and long skirt. My husband always wears his kippah anyway when we visit schools, but sometimes, and then I'll take it off halfway through our session with the children and say, yeah, look, some Jewish people dress like this, but hey, I don't. So it's quite interesting when you live outside the Jewish hub, the responses you get. So you can see in the days of our old Jewish community, it was a very busy port. And this is one of the yards. It's not the right yard. I hadn't got a photo. I've got a photo now where the synagogue in 1826 was in a little house like this. So it was called a synagogue, but it was just a little 2 up, 2 down building in a dark alleyway. It was certainly very well dressed inside because I have the accounts. I have, the meeting where they say they're going to paint the synagogue. They're always buying candles, and they pay a boy to come and light the candles when they have a service. So it was a very dark and dingy little synagogue, but apparently it's reported in one of the Jewish newspapers quite pretty. So they must have, there were velvet curtains, silver rimonim, new covers for the Sefer Torah, lots of candles and candlesticks. So it was probably very, very small, quaint, and pretty, but not synagogue as we would know it today. Those are just other views. And this is the sort of town they would have lived in. This building's gone. It was here once upon a time. That's the building, and that's what's replaced it now. That's our guild hall, which hasn't changed much at all. So these are the sights that our little community would have seen. They're the soldiers going off to the Napoleonic Wars. And as I say to people, it was the time they lived in from about 1750 to 1850, when they dispersed to other towns, is a time, this my historical book will be about, is a time of huge change. I want to write about this Jewish community and set them in the context they lived in. You had the Napoleonic Wars, you had the Austrian Wars in Europe. It's the age of Enlightenment, Mendelssohn and philosophy. Can Jews, the French Revolution, can Jews be good citizens? Or, are they always going to have Saturday off when we're fighting a war? There's science, there are inventions, we've got the steam technology. They're changing agriculture in our area. Norfolk in particular is way ahead with saying let's change the system, let's have a different agricultural system. There's all sorts of science going on. So this is one of the talks I gave, is saying, this is what's going on. And in our town in particular, there's another family that have emigrated and come to live in King's Lynn, the Vancouvers, who come from Amsterdam. And George Vancouver, when he's 13, he's not Jewish. When he's 13, instead of having a bar mitzvah, he's off to the Merchant Navy, and he's Vancouver in Canada. He's off with Captain Cook, discovering parts of the world. So yeah, I can understand why they came to live in King's Lynn. This is just my list of everything that's going on in Britain at the time, which when I write my book, I will obviously elucidate a bit more
How
on.
far are you with the book?
I'm just got so busy collecting information. I've got to start writing it down because I'm in my studio. My study is just full of paperwork and I need to write everything down.
Yeah.
So, but it's a very interesting times. So even the fashions change. We're starting off with men with tricorn hats and wigs and big floppy jackets. And by the end of this community, they're wearing tight trousers, hats. And the women are dressing. We're talking about Jane Austen, the times of Jane Austen. By the time that
So what happened in the end? Like, how did it end? What actually happened? Do you have any details?
Yeah, Cecil Roth in his book says, oh, but the trains came and they decided that it wasn't worth trying to make a living in King's Lynn. Actually, the Jewish community was finished before the first train arrived in King's Lynn. What happened was the community in Norwich started fundraising to build a new synagogue. They were also in a cramped house and they wanted to build a proper synagogue, the type of synagogue as we know them today. And they started a subscription. And many of the people who subscribed to the building of the new synagogue in Norwich were members of the King's Lynn community. And I think if you've paid into something, you probably want to go and move cities and go and enjoy the fruits of what you've paid for. So a great many of them moved. I've got Benjamin Kish's brother Moses is living in the next town to King's Lynn. He goes to Norwich and starts a shoe factory, which is successful, whereas he was receiving charity when he lived in King's Lynn. So that's a good move for him. Somebody else who's been receiving charity that lived in Ely, he also moves to King's Lynn and becomes a pillar of the community. There's a young lady called Annie who's helping her sister-in-law who has a large family. She moves to Norwich with the family and she marries the president of the synagogue. So moving to Norwich and elsewhere in Britain, you had a future. There wasn't a big enough community. 7 to 10 families. There's marriage continuation, it just gets too difficult. So I think that's what happened. Nothing to do with the trains coming.
Okay, interesting. Thank you so much. I'm gonna close the recording now so we could go to Q&A.
Brilliant. Lovely.